So, back to the story. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, and he ate. How was Eve tempted? St. John categorizes this in the New Testament as lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and worldly ambition. These are the three human temptations. She was tempted by tasty food, lust of the flesh. She was tempted by the look of the fruit, lust of the eyes. Ooh, shiny object, I want it. And most of all, she was tempted to be like God, worldly ambition. The serpent then isolates Eve. And Adam stands off to one side and lets her be isolated. As part of the temptation, we've got a breakdown of the marital relationship. Eve doesn't turn to Adam and say, hey, remind me what God said about the fruit. And Adam doesn't turn to Eve and go, hey, who's this? What are you saying to my wife? Instead, it seems he just heard the whole conversation and went along with it. And in the end, Adam and Eve both fell like rocks. They didn't put up one bit of resistance. Eve is enticed, she's deceived, and she eats. Adam silently gives in to her wishes, and he eats. He obeys human beings rather than God. Possibly the easiest way to just slide into sin. So then, what was the original sin? It's pride. Adam, again, most likely overheard the whole conversation. He's in on this. He wants to be like God. Adam and Eve are making a play for omniscience. They want to be in charge of their own morality. They want to gain that knowledge that God has, but instead they gain the knowledge of evil. They sin and they fall from grace. And for the people that weren't here last week, I want to reiterate a point that was brought up. Sometimes in popular thought, the original sin is thought to be sex, the loss of innocence. It's got nothing to do with that. Rather, in the Garden of Eden, we see that God commands the first couple to be fruitful and multiply. Sex, then, is part of God's original plan. And Thomas Aquinas, I remember I looked this up in college because I was a college student and I cared what Thomas Aquinas had to say about sex in the Garden of Eden. It seems that what Thomas Aquinas said is that, yes, God created the first couple, for a sexual relationship, and they could have had sex in the Garden of Eden, but they probably didn't, because nobody can remain without sin for more than about 3 hours or so, and they had to name the animals, they had to do all kinds of stuff. They probably just didn't get around to it. That's an interesting hypothesis. Then let's draw out some lessons for us. What can we learn from Adam and Eve about resisting temptation? Step 1 in fighting temptation. Realize you are being tempted. That is half the battle. We go along half asleep and don't even realize that we've lost our inner peace, that we're fretting, that we're angry, that something is wrong. And we don't even realize it until we start dumping our inner awfulness on the people around us. Step 1, realize you are being tempted. The serpent is cunning. He never shows up saying, hi, I'm going to tempt you. Adam and Eve didn't realize that they were being tempted. Not surprising, they had no experience with it. Sadly, we have plenty, but we don't always learn from it. We can learn from it. So stop and think for a moment. What are your areas of temptation? Being frustrated with things not going right. Would you say being overtired?
Overtired.
Yeah. And those things, just like not eating or sleeping right. They can be occasions of sin. They get you tempted more easily.
Garbage.
The temptation to expose ourselves to ideas that aren't true until it's all we hear. Yes?
Food and laziness.
Food and laziness, there we go. And yeah, I was thinking about that today. If you're dieting, is it a sin to eat chocolate? Mm-hmm. There's one of those questions that might be silly, except that it's a real question for so many people. And the answer is probably not. God gave us food to enjoy. On the other hand, if the food we're eating is wrecking our bodies, if the food we're eating is making us grumpy and uncharitable towards the people around us, then yeah, that's gluttony, and we need to stop it. So yeah, it's possible to sin with our food. But that doesn't mean chocolate is always wrong either. Again, there is a time for everything under heaven. Let's see. All right, I did my own list. Areas of temptation: anger, fear, impatience, gossip, greed, self-pity, apathy, lack of love. The list goes on. How does God want to change you? Where's your point of temptation that he wants to use to transform you into the person he created you to be?
You have to ask for his help to do that.
You have to ask for his help to do that. The next time this problem comes up, whatever it may be, the light bulb should go off in your head. I'm being tempted. Congratulations. That's the first step in resisting temptation. So keep that one in your head, whatever your temptation is. And the next time it becomes a problem, you can realize you are being tempted. All right, what's next? Oh, wait, one more thing. I do want to point out before we go further, not all sin is caused by the devil. So far I've talked as though, every little bad thing we do is the result of the devil scratching at us and whispering in our ears. I think he does that a good deal more often than most people realize. But it's not just him. The devil made me do it is never an excuse. We are perfectly capable of sinning by ourselves. But whether we're being tempted by the world, the flesh, or the devil, the strategy is basically the same. Realize you're being tempted is key. All right, what's step 2? Refuse to dialogue with the temptation. St. Francis de Sales called this step in his writings delectation, entertaining the idea of sin. That's what Eve was doing when the snake was talking with her, entertaining the idea that, the snake might have something after all. As soon as you realize you are being tempted, reject it. Reject the inner voice that wants to talk you into it. Do not try to reason with the voice of temptation. It will not play fair. Just stop it. Let's give a couple examples of real life. Imagine you're tempted to hold a grudge. You realize you're feeling angry at this person. Your inner voice starts thinking about all the things they've done to hurt you. You have a choice. You can listen to your inner voice and sink deeper into anger, or you can refuse. This is going to take prayer, willpower, all of that. We'll talk about that next. But you can refuse to keep traveling down that road. Another example. Imagine you're tempted to worry. You realize you feel worried. You're overextended. You have way too much to do today and you can't possibly get it all done. You have a choice. You can listen to your inner voices and sink deeper into worry, or you can refuse to listen. God does not give me more to get done in a day than I can possibly do in a day, so anything else must not be part of God's plan. Refuse to dialogue with temptation. Tell the voice of temptation to talk to the hand. You may have to do this more than once. Then what? The thoughts keep coming back, of course. Then what? Pray. You've recognized the temptation. You stopped listening to the temptation. Now you fight the temptation. Something as simple as, God, help me, will do. God doesn't need to hear a lot of words before he's going to step in and help us. But often, if the temptation is persistent, more persistent prayer helps us. You can have fun. Be creative. Some strategies I've used in the past that have been surprisingly helpful. Declare you are going to pray Hail Marys until your temptation goes away. All right, Mary, help me out here. Doing the dishes. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. About the 27th time, the devil's given up by then. Offer up the temptation you are suffering. And yes, being tempted is not a sin. Being tempted is a form of suffering. Offer it up for the salvation of souls. And actually, we're going to get into that a little bit more when we talk about the curse. here, the God's curse and promise, but the idea that the things we suffer here on earth, God uses them to bring about human redemption. If we are suffering, we're doing it out of love, directly or indirectly. We're doing it because we care enough to put ourselves in a situation where we're going through this difficult thing. We care enough to be close to a person who's suffering. We care, I can't give every example in the world, but suffering and love in our fallen world are intimately linked. I'm going to go into this more in a moment, but when we offer up our sufferings, it's an imitation of how Jesus offered up his suffering on the cross for the salvation of the world. We are participants with him in the salvation of the world, and we can offer up our own, often tiny little pathetic sufferings for the salvation of humankind. God accepts that sacrifice, and it's an amazingly powerful prayer. God, I am being tempted by thoughts of anger and resentment that won't go away. Oh God, I offer up this temptation that I would completely forgive this person, and that we would grow closer, and that they would draw closer to you. Oh, at that point, the devil has run screaming from the building. Never mind, that backfired. Sing songs of praise to God, if that's your thing. Sing. Turn on the radio. Sing along. Sing songs of praise to God. Smack talk the devil with psalms. It's one of my favorites. Let God arise. Let his enemies be scattered. Let those who hate him flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before fire, let the wicked perish before God. However you choose to do it, once the devil realizes that he has prompted you to a determined course of prayer, he will leave the building screaming, and the temptation will leave you. The book of James says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. This is extremely effective. I don't know if it's on a scale, but the idea is that we unite our sufferings with the sufferings of Jesus for the salvation of the world, that we are participants with him in the salvation of the world, and it lends something of it lends added power to our prayers. It really does. Again, I don't know how or why that should work, but it does. Yeah, God hears the cry of the poor. God hears the voice of the suffering. The blood of the martyrs cries out to God from the earth. This sentiment is all over Scripture. When we suffer, our prayers have extra power. All right. Something else you can do, along with prayer, that can help in resisting temptation, is to share your temptations with a spiritual friend who can encourage you and who can pray for you. The devil loves to lurk in the darkness. When you expose your temptations to the light, it's rather like exposing your sins to the light. In confession, with a friend or a spouse, another trusted spiritual advisor. The devil loves to isolate people. And when you share what's going on, it becomes clear in your own mind, it becomes clear in the other person's mind. They can help you, they can encourage you. The devil loves to isolate people like he isolated Eve. He runs away when he's exposed to the light. He's like a cockroach. And finally, act. Pray and act. Usually the action serves to distract us further from the temptation. Pick something good to do and do it. Don't just stand there worrying about how worried you feel. Pray and get started. Then you can focus on what's in front of you and on what God actually has for you at the moment, not on your temptation. Yeah, you can do something good instead, or you can even pray, okay, God, what should I be doing right now? Sometimes the answer is simply more prayer. Sometimes it's, no, get on with what's in front of you, do this. The work distracts from the temptation in most cases. All right, I have an example from yesterday that I thought was fun. Yesterday, I got out of bed on the wrong side of the bed, and every little thing my husband was doing was driving me crazy. And I thought about it, and I realized I was being tempted. And I think I'd already dialogued with the temptation enough. I realized I was being tempted, and I prayed about, God, help me here. This is temptation. And then I actually went straight to my husband. Hey, Frank, this is kind of crazy, but today, every little thing you're doing is driving me crazy. He's like, oh no, what did I do? I'm like, no, you didn't do anything. This is a temptation. I'm tempted to get mad at everything you do for no good reason at all. And I got a good night's sleep. I had a good breakfast. My health is fine. I can't think of any other explanation for this. I'm pretty sure this is direct temptation from the evil one. And I said, but I don't get it. I don't know why this is going on. And he said, oh, could it possibly be that tomorrow you're teaching about the fall of Adam and Eve? Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to spend the rest of the day writing about that, aren't I? Good call. He prayed for me. And he helped just make it so obvious what was going on. And the temptation fled.